It's an honor to be here with you again today, and I'm delighted that the community is again so large on this call here today. I want to thank you all for joining us. I particularly want to thank those who have been part of every session in this series, this being the fifth webinar, as Bryn pointed out, fifth of six series. There's been a large contingent that has attended and participated in all of the five sessions so far, and I do thank you for that. And I do thank you also for the many emails that I get after each session. I try to answer all the questions that I get, and also appreciate all the comments and ideas and insights that you so generously share with me. Today we are going to look at this idea of the 4 coaching power tools, and it's my hope that I can both provide you some immediately usable approaches and tools in your coaching, and also possibly take some of the mystique out of this idea of coaching. One of the really cool things about coaching is all of us can do it. There's not one person that I don't know that can't function in a coach-like way if he or she puts their mind to it. So I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to talk to you about coaching tools here today. Just give you a quick overview of our agenda. We're going to start out looking at the question, to what end? And this is really setting some context for the conversation here today, the why coach question. Then I'm going to take you on an exploration of the 4 coaching power tools, the first one being acknowledgement, second one being big questions, the third one being intuitional perspectives, and the fourth one being silence. Those 4 power tools will form the heart of our conversation here today. Also going to speak a little bit about the idea of coaching and counseling, similarities, differences, and how they come together on the use of the tools that we do use. Want to close the webinar today with a brief discussion on creating your own toolkit, how you might take these tools away today and actually apply them in your day-to-day work, whether or not it's formal coaching or other forms of leadership. So I guess the question we start with is this: to what end? Before we dive into the idea of tools and explore what tools and techniques and methodologies we can use as coaches, I think it's important first to explore the context in which we coach. What are the tools aimed at? I mean, why are we using the tools in the first place? What are really the objectives? We take very much an outcome-based approach to our coaching. We believe that coaching can best be understood by exploring and understanding the outcomes of great coaching. There is a core underlying principle to great coaching, and the principle is this: is that something significant changes as a result of coaching. There is a major shift in something. If there's not a major shift, if there's not a significant change, if there's not a tangible outcome, coaching is just talk. Now, that outcome can take a wide variety of forms, but something changes. So I share that with you so that you will challenge yourself as coaches to hold yourself to that standard. Now, you are not responsible for the change. The person you are coaching is. But if nothing changes, coaching is not happening. When we look at coaching, if you step back and we ask ourselves, okay, what does great coaching look like? We really need to point the lens towards the evidence. I would challenge you this morning or this afternoon to be thinking about this. I asked this question in an earlier webinar. If it was illegal to be a great coach, would there be enough evidence to convict you? The reason this is such a compelling question and challenging and somewhat haunting question for us is that to look at ourselves as great coaches mean we have to look at other people. Are we making a positive impact on their work, their lives, their career in some way? And is there evidence out there? Is something happening? Is there some evidence of our great coaching? So as you look at that, what evidence would there be? Look around you, your team, your organization today. Do you see people that are more committed, more creative, more accountable, growing in their own careers, learning, more productive in some way? Because this is the evidence of the great coaches. Another way of looking at the outcomes of great coaching is to consider the idea that we're all on a current road. The image that I have on the screen right now is a good model to understand this idea of bigger game coaching, of helping people achieve a bigger game in some way. So if you picture that we're all on a current road, we are all somewhere in terms of the level of our performance. Every person you coach, every person on this call is on a current road. We're at some place in our lives, in our career, in our work, and we go through this sometimes circuitous process of coaching to reach a new road. So the idea of coaching is to help people advance and have some kind of sustainable change in their behavior, their attitude, their career, whatever that might be. Now here's the real magic. The magic of coaching is to find that unseen road, to find that road that neither the coach nor the person being coached is immediately aware of. The real magic, the real power of coaching is helping people find that unseen road. So I'm going to guide you through a conversation here over the next 40 minutes or so when we look at the 4 basic power tools. And if you look around at the great coaches you'll see them instinctively using these power tools. The first power tool is the power tool of acknowledgement. This power tool often surprises people when they first hear about it. They wonder, okay, why would you use the word acknowledgement in the same breath as the term power tool? Simply because all great coaching starts with acknowledgement. The simple act of acknowledging another person in a positive way is the foundation for all great coaching. In the Tibetan language, there's a greeting, and the greeting is Tasha Delay. And if you were to greet somebody in the Tibetan language, you would really be saying, I see you. Literally translated, it means I see the light in you. I see the greatness in you. Now contrast that to our typical acknowledgments in our organizations today. You know, hi, how are you? You bounce by somebody in the hallway. You hope you don't have to acknowledge them twice in the same day. Sadly, I've been told by people in organizations that they can go an entire day and never truly feel that they've been acknowledged for who they are. An entire week, an entire year. Even more sadly, I've had conversations with people who have left their organizations after long careers and never felt like they were acknowledged anytime throughout the course of that career. The power of acknowledgement is the power that fuels the initial part of any kind of a coaching conversation. So do you see people, do you recognize people as being separate from yourself, unique and valuable? Now this may appear obvious to you that of course you do. Of course we see people as separate, unique, and valuable. But do you acknowledge them? Do they know that you believe they are separate, unique, and valuable? Because many times in our organizations, people feel much more that they are problems to be solved, or alternately, that they're pawns on the chessboard. When you think about the language we use in organizations, even the language that many of you carry on your business cards, human resources, there's a dark side, a dark edge to that you are a resource as opposed to a partner, as opposed to a separate, distinct, valuable person within the organization. Here are some examples of some acknowledgments. There's no specific right or wrong acknowledgement, but I wanted to share with you a few that you might consider using. These are the verbal acknowledgments that you might consider using early on in your coaching conversation. Simply saying to somebody, you know, you are a very interesting person. Think about if somebody started off a conversation with you that way. Wouldn't you feel acknowledged? Wouldn't you feel special in some way? You're obviously very talented, something. I see that you're having a very good time right now, or a very difficult time right now. I think you have great potential. I see you as something. One of the most powerful acknowledgments is one of the most simple. 3 simple words. I like you. I like you. If you can't think of any other kind of encouragement, simply saying, I like you, I'm enjoying working with you, I'm looking forward to coaching you, is one of the most powerful acknowledgments you can make. So let's shift to the second power tool, and that power tool of the question. We call it the big question. So what is a big question? What makes a question big? This is an interesting question to pursue. I'm going to give you an answer you probably didn't expect. What makes a question big is that the amygdala cannot answer it. The amygdala cannot answer it. I'll explain further. I'm going to give you just a brief, oversimplified lesson in the neurosciences about how we take in information and the impact that the questions have on us. You'll see on your screen the illustration of a brain. I'm oversimplifying, but there's three major components of the brain. There's the brain stem, there's the amygdala, this little almond-shaped piece right in the very middle of our brain, and there's a neocortex. Think of the brain stem as the receptacle of all these minute electrical charges that come into our brain that carry the results and the stimulation from our five senses. So these things come into our brain, they move up through the brain into the amygdala, and from the amygdala into the neocortex. What happens is when the amygdala is the storehouse for all of our emotional responses, and what happens is when a question comes in or some kind of stimulation comes in that doesn't require much thought, then the amygdala forms an emotional response immediately. Essentially what's happening is when we are responding to a question that cannot be answered by the amygdala, cannot be answered by some base, very routine, practiced emotional responses, we need to go to our neocortex. And in the neocortex is the language portions of our brain. This is the portions of our brain that we're able to use to formulate a response. So we're able to craft an answer that is deeper than one that is practiced and one that we've answered before. And why? So we can really see the world through fresh eyes. If you ask a question that the amygdala cannot answer, then we're asking a question where a person has to think through their deepest values, thoughts, needs, fears, wants, passions in which to answer that question. Now, one of the mistakes that new coaches often make is that they believe they ask questions so that they can hear the answer. Now, you need to ask enough questions so you can get enough information so you can have a rational, intelligent, high-level conversation. But the real reason that we ask questions is to help individuals hear their own answers. It's to help them see their issue through fresh eyes. I'd like to share with you some examples of what we would consider to be big questions. And as I share these big questions, I would encourage you to consider what would your response be to these questions. As you look at these questions, what would your personal response to the questions be? Some examples of big questions that I'd like to share with you are coming up on the screen here shortly. And as I do, please give some thought to how you would respond if a coach asked you this question. What important thing have you learned about yourself recently? This is the kind of question that points the accountability for learning and growth and development squarely at the person being coached. What excites you most about the future of your organization? Think about that as a kind of question to start off a performance-based discussion. Many times, the quality of the first question we ask sets the stage. It's the rut the entire conversation stays in. You ask a question like this: what excites you most about the future of your organization? It's very difficult to get granular after confronting a question like that. What about the future scares you? When you are at your best, what are you doing? Think about that, how you would respond when somebody says, when you're at your best, what are you doing? Think about what's implied there. It's implied that you do have a best, that you do have value. Also implied there is that you have the power to be at your best, probably more frequently. What can you do better than almost everyone else? This is the kind of question that helps people see the uniqueness in themselves. One of the challenging questions that I like to use early on in a coaching conversation: if your performance does not change, what will likely happen? If your performance does not change, what will likely happen? If a person responds to this question with an answer that says, I'm happy with my performance, my guess is that coaching should not continue. We coach people who want to lift their game in some way and are aware of that. This is my favorite, one of my favorite questions of all time. What would really happen if you took your foot off the brake? The assumption that this question is based on is this: most limitations are self-imposed. We like to blame others. We like to blame our family. We like to blame our staff members. We like to blame our boss, the customers, the company. We like to blame the government. However, most of the things that hold us back are self-imposed. They're attitudes. They're small ways we sell out on ourselves. They are limitations, illogical, irrational limitations we put on ourselves. This is a great question to get people to break free from that mold of self-limiting attitudes and behaviors. One of the questions I use often towards the end of a coaching conversation is this: what one personal change will result in the biggest benefit? Again, this keeps the responsibility and accountability for the coaching, to be with the other person, to be a resident with the person being coached. It also assumes that there's always something. My guess is every person on this call, if you were honest in answering this question, every one of us has one personal change that we know if we make it will have the biggest benefit on our work or on our career. What's an entirely different way to see your situation? Occasionally I'll ask somebody who's very senior to respond to this question: what would your situation look like through the eyes of a child? What would your situation look like through the eyes of a child? Now, I would caution you about approaching your CEO, and the first time you're going to coach him or her is to confront them with that question. But there might be a time for that, when we, through the coaching process, can really help the person gain a different, really radically different perspective by asking such a question. How would others describe your performance? I actually use this question. I get people to pick six people, and make a few notes as to how each one of those people would describe your performance, your contribution, your work, your career, whatever that might be. It's a phenomenal exercise for the person doing it. Eye-opening, jaw-dropping, haunting, very educational. What thoughts and habits no longer serve you well? This is the question to challenge people to really explore what they need to leave behind so they can move ahead. There's one type of question that we find not as useful to coaches as almost every other kind of question I've shared with you today, and that is what we call the why question. Why you do things. Now, for those of you who are involved in process improvement and the like, you'll often use these questions to get the root cause. For the coach, the root cause is not so important. Really, the why question is a question of the psychologist. Many times, the why question can actually take us down pathways and rat holes that are really non-productive in the coaching conversation. We tend not to ask why people do things. We tend to ask what they want to do. What do they want changed? How do they want to show up differently? When do they want to change their career? What do they want their career to look like? What's the biggest and best outcome they can imagine? So if you look at this idea of the why question, I encourage you to either not use the why question at all in your coaching or to use it very sparingly. The third power tool, coaching power tool, is the power of intuition. We call it intuitional perspectives. Essentially, what this power tool means that if you think it, say it. If you think it, say it. With a big caveat. The caveat is noble intention. Noble intention is essentially the idea that we as coaches need to manage our interpersonal needs. We all have them. We have needs and wants to ensure that all coaching is done in the service of the talent. So when you think about it, intuitional perspective is listening to your intuition and sharing what you think would be the best service of the person you're coaching in the moment. It's an insight. It's a feedback. It's a confrontation. It can be another question. It is about the idea that if you think it with noble intention, you say it. And we serve the person being coached by sharing these intuitional perspectives. So if we look at this idea again, the power of intuition, if you think it, say it. With the one caveat, again, noble intention. Now, I'd like to share some intuitional perspectives with you, if I could, please. Bryn, if you could advance the slide, please. And then one more, please. There we go. Some examples of intuitional perspective. Now, the term intuitional perspective was really coined to capture all the things that one might do when you're not answering, neither acknowledging or asking questions. Sharing with somebody the fact that you think they have great courage. Very powerful intuitional perspective. Please continue, Bryn. At the end of every conversation, here is the way you measure yourself as to whether or not you truly have shared your intuitional perspective with the person you're coaching. You feel you can walk away empty. When you've said everything that needs to be said, not so you feel better by getting it off your chest, but you never walk away with a regret. You never walk away from a coaching conversation saying, you know, I really should have said this. I wish I had the courage to say this. You know, if I would have said this, things would have been better in some way. The true measure of you as a coach and whether or not you shared your intuition, your intuitional perspective with the person you're coaching is how you feel when you left. Do you really feel that you gave it all? Did you really, or did you feel you left some on the table? Did you feel you walked away empty, or did you walk away with some things that you really wish you would have shared with that person? The secret to this idea of intuitional perspective is this, is that if you have noble intention, you really can't go wrong. Think about it this way. If somebody came to you to have a conversation, to share some insights, observations, or some feedback with you, and you knew in your heart of hearts that they had your very best interest at heart, that they really cared about you and they were doing this solely for you, you'd give them a wide berth. However, if the converse is true, if you didn't trust that person, if somehow you thought that person was doing it to get it off their chest, to satisfy their needs in some way, then you would not give them such a wide berth. We tend to really give those people a very narrow pathway in terms of the things that they can talk to us about. The fourth power tool, and again, somewhat surprising, is the power tool of silence. Silence can be a very powerful tool in coaching. Think about the weather and the elevator. What do those two things have to do with each other? Well, simply this. I will guarantee you, wherever you are today, when you leave this call, if you go to your closest elevator and get on the elevator and have a conversation with somebody, especially if that person is a stranger, the topic of that conversation is likely to be about the weather. So why do we speak about the weather? The reason we have the conversation about the weather, it's not because we care about what the other person's opinion is. It's not because we're going to get some information from that person that we don't know about the weather. It's because we cannot stand the intensity, the intimacy of silence. We cannot stand the intensity and intimacy of silence. That's the very reason that we should bring that into the coaching conversation. The very reason that we should only speak when we have something to say. If you look at there's a wonderful book, I've quoted it several times, Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. And she says, let silence do the heavy lifting. So I would really encourage you to look at this idea of silence and bring 2 or 3 seconds of silence into every coaching conversation you have at the end of each leg of the conversation. It will enormously enhance the quality of the dialogue. Try this sometime. If you're having a conversation with somebody and it's a low-grade conversation and you want to increase the quality of the conversation, try this. Have a 2 or 3 second break at the end of the other person's leg of the conversation. They will immediately raise the quality of their conversation. The reason being is because what they said will sit out there in silence, will sit out there, and they will now hear their own words. Silence is a very powerful tool for the coach. Coaching and counseling. I'd like to just address this briefly because there's often a lot of confusion between the two. We do use the same tools. Coaches and counselors use the same tools. We both use the tool of interpersonal interactions. We listen. We use a tool of questions and the like. But the two are diametrically opposed, dramatically opposed processes. In counseling, counseling tends to be a process, a helpful process for people that are hurting in some way of dealing with past issues and resolving issues to make them healthy again. We've probably all been there to some degree. We use, and therapists, which I'm not, counselors, which I'm not, use questions and dialogue and conversation to help a person resolve these issues so they can become healthy into the future. Coaches, on the other hand, coaches move to the future. Coaches are only interested in one thing. How are you going to climb that mountain? How are you going to perform at a bigger level? How are you going to interact better with people? How are you going to grow your career? In what ways can you do? The picture on the screen right now is actually not a picture of me. The idea behind this is that sometimes coaching is not enough. And when coaching is not enough, I would encourage you not to practice without a license. Now, I know a number of coaches are also very fine counselors, but they are very rare and unique professional. Most of us who coach are not qualified counselors. We are not qualified to help people through those most difficult times in their lives when they have deep social or psychological issues or things they need to work through or repair in some way. I share this with you so that you will be aware of this. And in your coaching, if you come across somebody who does need that kind of help, that you find the professional to refer them to, as opposed to try to use coaching to help people that it is not intended to do. So, how do you create your own toolkit? I'd like you to be thinking about this for the moment in terms of there is no magical toolkit. I can't give you the exact 2 or 3 questions or acknowledgements that you can always use, put them into your toolkit, and use them in every circumstance. What I would, however, is encourage you to use these 4 tools and to prepare yourself well to always use these 4 in almost every coaching conversation. In every coaching conversation, you will have an opportunity to make a decision and draw from that toolbox. Think about it this way. In coaching, all we have is the now. Think about it. In everything else we do, we're probably working on some time-bound projects. But in coaching, all we have is the next moment ahead of us with the person who we're coaching. And what do we do in that moment? We call the person that is being coached the talent. What can we do in that next moment to best serve the talent? What tool can we draw upon? Some feedback, possibly. A question, possibly. An affirmation, an acknowledgement, possibly. A constructive confrontation, an insight, or possibly nothing at all. Maybe it is just simply silence in the moment. So if you look at coaching as a very much in the now process, having a very full, well-used toolbox is particularly important. So as you think about this idea of creating new habits as a coach, I would encourage you to base these new habits on these 4 power tools. Always be prepared early on in the coaching conversation to acknowledge the person being coached in some way. Let them know that you see them as a separate, valuable human being. Don't make the assumption. Let them know verbally. Let them know you're looking forward to working with them. Let them know that you see potential in them. Let them know that you feel honored to be working with them. think about the big questions you can ask. I would encourage you to have a list of questions and keep them handy with you. I would encourage you not to simply read in rote through those questions, but keep in mind the big questions that you believe really help the person being coached rethink their situation, help them see their situation through fresh eyes. Ask them what they would do if they had unlimited resources. When they're at their best, what are they doing? What can they do to get out of their own way? What's the most potent thing they can do to change their own circumstances? How could they do more of the work that they really love? These are the kind of questions you can put into your toolbox. And as you become familiar with those questions, you will instinctively know which ones are the best to use in the moment. The third one is the power of intuition. And the power of intuition is really not a set of intuitional statements, but it's much more about an attitude and an approach. And here's how you fill your toolbox with intuitional perspectives. Number one is you trust your intuition. If you hear voices, use those voices. Rely upon those voices. Your intuition is formed on the basis of your values, your perceptions, your attitude towards the person, a number of things. These thoughts, these intuitions have incredible value for the person being coached. That's number one. Number two is be really clear on your intentions. Really clear on your intentions. Make sure your intentions are strictly to help the person being coached. The combination of intention and intuition is a very powerful force. And lastly, practice saying nothing. If you have nothing to say nothing at all. Listen to your organization sometime. Just walk through the organization and listen. You'll be amazed at the amount of drivel, blather that occurs all day long. And we're all part of it. We use language as a social lubricant. Language is very much the tool of the coach. Respect it. Only use it when it's going to have a profound impact on the person being coached. And recognize that as we use silence, silence punctuates what we have to say. Silence not only punctuates, but heightens what the other person has to say. So be very liberal with your silence. I'm going to thank you for staying on the line today. We still have a very large contingent on the line, and I do recognize that it has been a very challenging webinar. The subject is near and dear to my heart. Happy to continue the conversation with anybody who would like to give me a call or send me an email. Happy to have that conversation. My challenge to you is this, is that you'll be thinking about this idea of coaching not just as a formal process, but something you can do in every conversation you have for the rest of the day today. Now, every conversation you have an opportunity to indelibly impact the lives and careers and work of the person you're speaking with. My encouragement to you is to see if you can make that happen. It may not happen, but it may. And it may be a 30-second conversation or maybe a 3-hour conversation. We as coaches believe that we can ignite performance one conversation at a time.